Kenmore City Council is now in session. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember File.
Present.
Councilmember Kugler.
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Baker.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Here.
Mayor Herbig.
Here.
All present.
Would you all please stand and join me in the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is the agenda approval. Unless there's any objections, the agenda will stand approved as published. Seeing no objections, the agenda is approved. Next up, we have a proclamation. Arts of Kenmore 2023 Youth Poet Laureate Jayden Chang. Whereas the Arts of Kenmore is committed to lifting the voices of emerging young poets, written and spoken word artists, supporting career and college readiness, and engaging youth through civic and community leadership. And whereas the Arts of Kenmore conducted a thorough adjudication under the purview of the National Scholastic Competition Guidelines, and whereas Jayden Chang was selected and has accepted the title of Youth Poet Laureate to represent the community of Kenmore, Washington with utmost distinction and to the best of his abilities throughout his life. And whereas Jayden will release a selection of his original works to be published by East Point West Press Publishing. And whereas Jayden will create a community service project expanding the reach and platform of Youth Poet Laureate by engaging peers and audiences in the region around an issue and or theme that holds special significance to him. And whereas Jayden will promote National Poetry Month in April and participate in a variety of community and regional opportunities and platforms engaging community and accessible poetry, arts, and culture. And whereas Jayden will dedicate a year of service to represent the Kenmore community and his peers from May 2023 through May 2024. Now, therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim July 17th, 2023 to be Youth Poet Laureate Day throughout the City of Kenmore and encourage our community to engage and support the art of poetry. And I would like to invite Jayden to come up and say a few words and I think read us a poem.
I'm going to say a word first. Sarah Hayashi, as the Director of Arts of Kenmore. It is a great honor of mine to present Jayden to our council and our community. Jayden is a senior at Inglemoor High School, or will be a senior this fall, and part-time student at Cascadia in the Running Start program. Transgender young gentleman who is active member of Inglemoor's marching band, drumline, in multiple sports, including our city's rowing team, and pursuing future in fashion, and of course, creative writing. When Jayden applied for or submitted for the competition, he said, "Poetry allows all sorts of people to share their voices. I love how Kenmore is opening up opportunities to diverse groups, including youth, in order to hear the voices of many who would not be heard otherwise. As Kenmore's Youth Poet Laureate, I will represent the LGBTQ+ community as well as the Asian community. Being Youth Poet Laureate is a great learning experience that will support me throughout my years of writing and public speaking." And with that, I will hand it over to Jayden, presenting him with the medallion, declaring you our Youth Poet Laureate.
To give a little background on the poem I'll be sharing tonight, I wrote a poem on April 29th, 2022, and I wrote this poem 1 year later to reflect on the significant changes and developments a person can make within just a year. The poem I will be reading is entitled "To My Pen Pal," April 29th. We did stay all the same. I remember you were the heaviest afternoon of them all. Room temperature tongue accepted itself through stinging opaque, skin daunted in the stretch of oxygen. The day warrants an apology, and it's not the last. It all makes euphoria tremble, comprehending how to hold oxygen gently. Notes enveloped under chaos, I recall you wondered where the truth had driven, and the truth is, it is only when the moon's cheeks are glowing with ivory do I think of you. It's odd we admit the orbit unraveling between us seeps honey from bitter disconnect, the 4 seasons between us. Every pen bled from the dusk, and it was then I could feel the ink ooze from me. The mundane starts to seep through skin when twilight severs from my view, and now my oxygen is brimming with determination, and I am determined too. The year is over. April was the heaviest afternoon of them all. Heather escaped the will of bending its eternity at the heart in hopes we all saw the same eclipse that simply passed by me. My friend, I regret everything. Still I survived, all the same. Thank you.
Jayden, before you get all the way to your seat, we'd like to invite you up here to present the proclamation to you, and we'll take a photo with the council. Next on the agenda is presentations. First presentation is to introduce new staff. Principal Planner Todd Hall, introduced by Community Development Director Debbie Bent. It's Ben.
Good evening, Council. It's my pleasure to introduce Todd Hall, who is the new Principal Planner in the Community Development Department. So Todd's duties will include preparing amendments for the comprehensive plan and implementing strategies and policies, and working directly with the Planning Commission as staff to the Planning Commission, and he'll be before you along with the Planning Commission presenting recommendations. Todd has a wealth of experience. Most recently, he came from the North Shore School District in the Capital Projects Department, and prior to that has a lot of experience. So without further ado, let me introduce Todd to say a few words. Thank you.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, good evening. A pleasure to be here with the city. As Debbie mentioned, I most recently came from North Shore School District, where I spent about 1.5 years as the capital projects director. I quickly realized that I missed my true heart of where it's been for most of my career, which is land use planning. I've been in the field for about 20+ years. And so I'd wanted to get back into planning, and an opportunity arose here at Kenmore, and I'm just super thrilled to be here and join a great team. I've met a lot of the new staff over the last 3+ weeks that I've been here, and I can truly say that you have an excellent staff here and a passionate community, and I'm just really excited to be a part of the team and to bring forward a great plans that we have for you in store. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I can speak for the council by saying that we're very happy that you are here and we welcome you. So
Great. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next we have a presentation from the Kenmore Waterfront Activities Center and the Seattle Flying Dragon Boats Club, presented by Bobgan, the Kenmore Waterfront Activities Center Board Director at Large, and Seattle Flying Dragon Boat Club Head Coach.
Thank you very much. So council members, mayor, deputy mayor, I run the Dragon Boat program here at the park. And I've been a member of Seattle Flying Dragons for about 12 years. But I still remember 9 years ago when we came up to Kenmore and we dragged an old relic of a dragon boat into the water for the first time, and we had our first practice. A lot of things have changed since then, mostly thanks to what the city has done and how the city has really made getting people on the water a priority. We now have 4 relatively new boats, 2 of them funded by the city. We have a beautiful park that's been created by the city, managed by the city, and we are growing exponentially. Last 2 Sundays ago, we had 13 brand new paddlers who had never paddled a dragon boat before come out to the practice. So we're doing a lot to be able to get people out on the water. From that first day to today, the city of Kenmore has really done more than I would have ever imagined a city could do to just really promote such a great activity, such as dragon boating or all the other water sports that are there. That's why when we went to Panama, the Seattle Flying Dragons, we went to Panama to compete in the Pan American Club Crew Championships, which is the reason I'm wearing the Panama hat, which I'll take off now because my wife has been telling me that I'm not supposed to wear a hat indoors. Well, so we went down to the Panama Club Crew Championships, and just to give you an idea of what that is, and there's some slides up there that are showing the flag. So we were really proud to take the flag. It was given to us by Rob, and we were thrilled because really felt like Kenmore was behind our efforts as a Dragon Boat Club, and so we were proud. We have Seattle on our jersey, but Kenmore, at least in my heart, and being able to take the flag down there, and you'll see a lot of pictures with the flag. Those championships, it was in Panama City. And it was the first time our club had ever done something like this type of competition. And they were 10-person boats instead of 20. And you guys helped us prepare because we now have 2 10-person boats here on Lake Washington, and we were able to prepare for those races. What we weren't able to prepare for was the heat, the humidity, and a lot of wind, but we did feel pretty prepared. The first day of races, so the first day of races are 2,000-meter races, and it's a loop. So just consider NASCAR on rough water with 10 people, well, actually 12 people in the boat. So it's pretty crazy. There were boats that capsized. Fortunately, we didn't get wet. Well, we got wet, but we didn't capsize. And then the second day is 1,000-meter races, and the third day is 500-meter, and the last day is 200-meter. There were 92 teams from 10 different countries. And so it was a great international experience. A lot of countries saw the Kenmore flag at our tent there. We entered 3 divisions. There were 20 of us that went. 7 of those 20 predominantly paddle out of Kenmore. We have another location at South Lake Union, but like a third of the group that went were from Kenmore, and many of them started paddling because of the location here. We entered a mixed team, an open mixed, which is 5 men and 5 women of any age. We entered a women's an open women's, which is 10 women of any age, and we entered a senior masters, which is 5 men, 5 women over 50. That was a little bit challenging, so we didn't really medal in the first 2 categories because 10 of the 20 of us who went are over 60. We were a bit out of our category, but at no point were we ever like that boat that everyone's waiting to finish so we can move on. So we were part of the competition, but where we did okay, we did really well, I think, is in the mixed B division, because then we were just racing against those young 50-year-olds. So we actually came in 4th and just missed a medal by a few seconds and a few tenths of a second in just different places. But while we didn't bring home any medals, what we did bring back is a lot more enthusiasm for racing and for getting on the water. A couple of the pictures you'll see is some pictures from recent races in Tacoma and Kent, where we did bring back medals. One thing we did get from the race, every team received a gift as a memento of the event. And so in honor of all that the city has done for us and all that we've done together to get people out on the water, we're presenting this to the city. But we're taking the flag because we're going to Canada, to Harrison Hot Springs next weekend.
Thank you very much for that update. Next, King County Metro Lynnwood Link Connections Phase 3 service proposal presented by Government Relations Jurisdictional Lead Amanda Pleasant Brown, Transportation Planner, Lynnwood Link Connections Project Manager Corey Holder, and Community Engagement Planner Lynnwood Link Connections Lead Luke Distelhorst. I'm impressed by the length of all of your job titles. Oh, and we have Chris Arkills here.
Yes.
We're in for a treat. Okay, great. Glad to have you, Chris.
While we're getting set up, I'll go ahead and start introductions. My name is Chris Arkills. I work in government relations for King County Metro. I've seen many of you at Seashore meetings, and Sound Transit meetings. So it's good to be here tonight. I'll turn it over to Corey.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Corey Holder. I'm with Service Planning at King County Metro, and I'm the project manager for the Lynnwood Link Connections Project.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Luke Distelhorst, him, Senior Community Engagement Planner with King County Metro.
Thanks. Yeah, so we're here to talk about the Lynnwood Link Connections project. We're here in phase 3.
We'll figure this out any second.
All right, thanks. So just a reminder on the project, I'll go over the scope and kind of context of the project briefly. So we're looking at the opening of Sound Transit Light Rail with 4 stations in 2024, Shoreline South, Shoreline North, Mount Lake Terrace, and Lynnwood. And also looking at some future options from Sound Transit beyond that with the 130th station in 2026, as well as the future Stride BRT on Route 522. So what we're looking at in the project is routes that kind of travel in the vicinity and interact with that future extension, which is 23 total routes we're looking at in our project. 15 are all-day routes and 8 are peak-only routes. So those routes make up our budget for the project, looking at budget neutral of how we can reinvest hours and make connections with the new service. I'll note those routes do include, our budget for that does include any currently suspended hours as well. So our baseline is kind of current plus any suspended resources. And looking at the map, the yellow on there is our project areas where we're really focusing our engagement as well as our analysis. So really trying to engage with community in that area and make sure we're improving access in those areas. And just making a final note that we are coordinating with Sound Transit on the planning of this, particularly on the 522 BRT corridor, so making sure our changes align. And I will note Sound Transit's not with us tonight, so any questions specific for them should be directed to Sound Transit. A reminder on project goals, the same as last time we met with you in phase 2. But first and foremost, we're looking at improving mobility for priority populations as defined by the mobility framework. And a reminder is Metro defines priority populations as Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, folks with low or limited income, people with disabilities, immigrants and refugees, and diverse language speakers. Important part of our customer base and really wanting to make sure we're engaging with those customers in the process. Second, making sure we're equitably informing, engaging, and empowering our customers in that project area. Third, really delivering an integrated service that responds to this link connection and changes in the transit network. So making sure we're really coordinating and not duplicating services, but making services that connect together and can really leverage the light rail service. And lastly, in doing so, we're making sure we're improving the efficiency, effectiveness, and environmental sustainability of our system. So timeline, where we are right now, we're right at the start of phase 3. Our engagement launched last week for the service proposal. So earlier this year, we were out with phase 2. Last time we talked to you all, we presented, that was our first kind of lines on the map in phase 2. We received a really large amount of feedback, some great engagement during phase 2. So a lot of community feedback that we put into making revisions to that network, arriving at that phase 3 proposal where we're at now, getting feedback on. I was really happy with the amount of feedback we heard, that there was a lot of, I think we could make a lot of good responses on the phase 3 network. And so this engagement will be open through the summer and working out any late changes the last part of this year. This will be going to King County Council process in the early part of next year for approval for a fall 2024 service change is what we're currently planning for, which aligns with what we've heard most from Sound Transit around Lynnwood Link opening. Those highlights overall of the phase 3 service proposal. So we have a map of the proposed network on the right side. It's consistent with feedback we heard in phase 1 and phase 2 is really continuing to shift more towards an all-day frequent network that includes evening and weekend service, less peak only, so more of those all-day connections that really work with Link that's running all day every day. And Link Light Rail is providing that very frequent north-south service. So that allows for us to establish a lot more east-west connections that connect with those, enabling folks to get both north-south, but also as we look at connections at some of those stations, enables connections between other routes as well, enabling a lot of new origin destination pairs. And as we're doing this as well as making sure we're maintaining or improving transit access for our equity priority areas and priority populations. So our equity priority areas are our census block groups that have the highest concentrations of priority populations. On this map, those areas are noted in gray. So really trying to make sure we're providing access in those areas.
Your Honor, can I make one request? So you can see that the council chambers photo is right over the top of Kenmore there. Are there any lines that we're missing because of that square that's there?
There will be a slide in a moment showing that area.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Good catch. So I'll talk into a few of the changes specific to Kenmore to highlight here. So I'll start with revised Route 331. So Route 331 today goes between Shoreline Community College, Aurora Village, and Kenmore. So looking at some changes with this, one is extending the route from Kenmore to Bothell. So expanding that east-west connection where this would go all the way out to UW-Bothell. A second change is at Ballinger, having it add kind of a new diversion that goes up to Mount Lake Terrace Station, where this route would provide a link connection there as well. Third, having this route run later into the evening than it does today. So ends around 7 p.m. today. So in our proposal, we have this going till midnight on weekdays and 11 on weekdays. That better aligns with kind of the link service hours as well. And for kind of overall span, 20-minute frequency on weekday peak, 30 minutes on off-peak hours. Yeah, on the map, the pathway of that's highlighted here in the orange.
Councilor Shevnik.
Before you go on, so this would connect to the light rail at one of these junctures,
Mount Lake
right?
Terrace,
Yeah, thank you.
At the top of the page. This one route that we would have Sound Transit share, but I would kind of give the highlights is how it interacts with our network. So looking at revisions to Route 522. So this is set up of changes that would set up the line for the future stride BRT, and also kind of covered by the council chambers at the top. They noted that this is an anticipated 2025 change to reorient 522 would serve 145th, where it would connect to the Shoreline South 148th Street station. So that would be running from Kenmore there to that Shoreline South Station via 148th. And their plan is described to us as that routing change will happen in 2025 when the East Link 2 line opens to Seattle, when Link has the full capacity of both the 1 and the 2 line.
When is the Shoreline station supposed to open? I can't remember.
So for the Shoreline Station, we're targeting the fall 2024 service change. So our notes from Sound Transit said summer or fall of 2024. The East Link, I think full 2 line opening is still a little to be determined, tentatively 2025 now. So I think they're targeting the 2 lines being ready together for that change.
Thank you.
Important to note here that we're coordinating with Sound Transit of like when that change happens affects a lot of our changes. So working together on that to make sure areas are covered when that change happens. And on that note of coordinating with Sound Transit when that change to 145th happens, one thing we're proposing is Route 372 would be replaced by a new Route 72. So it's basically the section of Route 372 from 145th and Lake City South, but added also a new east-west connection on 145th to connect to the new 148th station. So this route is proposed in the network as being 10-minute frequency all day on weekdays. This has a 7-day-a-week service. So looking at this would provide a Kenmore to UW connection with the Stride running 7 days a week. The connection between Stride and Route 72 or Stride and Link will provide all week coverage to University of Washington.
Quick question on this. I'm not sure exactly where the Stride, I know this is kind of outside of your area also, but in case you happen to know, I know that I don't know exactly where the Stride stops are supposed to be, are going to be sited on 145th. With this change in particular, I would really hope that there's a stop like right at 145th and Lake City Way to make it easier for folks to then just cross the street over and catch a 72 straight down.
Yeah, that's something we're coordinating with Sound Transit to try to achieve a good stop pair at 145th and Lake City Way.
Okay.
Transfers.
I think that's really paramount.
I would agree. Yeah, and this with this change, it would offer improved weekend service. As noting, Route 372 doesn't go all the way out to Kenmore on the weekends, so it stops in Lake City. So between these 2 routes, there would be kind of more frequent all-day weekend service. And as noted, we wouldn't make the 372 change until Sound Transit has revived the 522. All right, next up, exciting one here we're proposing is North Kenmore Metro Flex area. So for some background on Metro Flex, that's a kind of point-to-point on-demand service where you pay a regular fare. We have it in the Juanita area currently in Kenmore. So this would be a new second zone covering North Kenmore and North Lake Forest Park. So the areas north of 522 and Ballinger Way. It's showing on the map here. You see there's no transit lines on the map there, which was a big thing we were looking at of covering that area. So there's a equity priority area there in North Kenmore up against the county line, which in our phase 2 network was our only equity priority area that was not served. So made this kind of a high priority for adding service there, connection in this area. And kind of logistics on this one, it does proposing it going a bit over the county line into Mount Lake Terrace to provide that connection to the light rail station. So in the North Kenmore area, that is the closest station. So I think it makes sense to create that connectivity going all the way over to Mount Lake Terrace Station, or on the south, you have connections to either the 522 BRT or Route 331. And with that overlap, we have been coordinating with community transit on partnering on this. So I think they're on some different stages there, but we've had some promising conversations around partnership funding in the future to look at kind of expanded hours or service on this as well. Because I think the northern part of this is an area they've had challenges with serving as well, kind of due to street grid and fitting buses through. So,
Councilor Marshall.
Thank you. So do the blue lines along the roads actually depict potential routes?
So this is kind of an on-demand point-to-point, they work more like an Uber ride. So this is kind of showing more arterials on the map.
I see. Okay. I just wanted to bring it up because to keep in the collective memory that there was a great bus route that served both 61st and 68th, where we have so many older multifamily units. It's just, it was a great service. And of course, I'm just, pushing or wishing that it could get in there again. So thank you.
Councilor Rafael.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. It popped up on the screen that you raised your hand in Zoom. I was a little confused, but I apologize.
I'll note there's a small overlap zone on this with the current Juanita Metroflex as well. So you could kind of get between the two areas if you need it at the Kenmore Park and Ride area.
As somebody who has been pointing this out every time I talk to Metro for the last year or so, I want to say thank you. I even brought this up last Friday, I think, at ETP. This is huge, and I deeply appreciate taking that into consideration. So thank you.
And I'll just quickly note some things not changing in Kenmore for Metro service with the proposal. Route 225 remains the same. The proposal of Kenmore Totem Lake to Overlake. Route 322 is in the proposed network as well, which is peak only service to First Hill from Kenmore. Route 342 as well remains, which provides service in the morning from Shoreline to Bellevue and Renton, and in the PM back from Bellevue and Renton. I will note in the East Link Connections project that had a separate proposal, that route is proposed to turn into two-way service in both peak directions. So I'll note that as well as like a future change outside of this project as well. Able to go both directions in either peak, and the Juanita area Metroflex as well remaining.
Councilor Baker, did you have a question?
Yeah, is there any hopes of getting any more metro service up on the north end of town where we had, I believe it was the 306, the 309 was up in there? That's really been detrimental to the community to have that taken away. And I think the mayor talked about it at ETP last week. Is there any chance of having that get some semblance of it servicing that part of our city, so we could theoretically tie in to light rail?
Yeah, I think at this phase, probably not enough kind of total hours in our budget to look at that, but I think the Metroflex will be a case where we can see, you know, what level of ridership's there. I think would make a case if that's a strong ridership there.
So then the only thing that we really have in Kenmore is 322.
Route 331, the Stride route with Sound Transit or 522 today. It's Metroflex as well.
331 is a part of Stride?
Route 331, I can back up. You know what?
I thought 331 was you guys, Metro.
Yep, 331 is ours. So we have 331 in Kenmore and proposing extending this also to Bothell. So that service will kind of serve more of Kenmore, not just terminating at the Park and Ride as well.
That's more connecting the two universities, though.
Yeah, as well as
it doesn't do too much for interconnection within the city.
and the 522 BRT would be the other Kenmore route, kind of interconnectivity between stations as well. But I think, yeah, really looking at this Metroflex for kind of more of the local point-to-point coverage, which would have some advantages over, I think some of those past routes were more peak only oriented as well, where this would have a more all-day service span.
So it's 372 at this point, our connection between UW-Bothell and the main campus.
That is the current connection, correct?
Councilor Shrubnik.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing the Metroflex, and I think it is really great to have some service in this area. I question, I guess, the assumption that demand on this would give you any picture whatsoever of what demand on an actual route would be. They're really apples and oranges. So I thought I heard you say that it would give you a sense of that, and I'm not seeing it that way at all.
I think if a Metroflex area demonstrates a very strong ridership, it begs the question that whether we should look at replacing that with fixed route service. They both have advantages and disadvantages. Fixed route service in an area where it's not super frequent may attract less riders than a flexible service people can call up on an app. So, the street grid in the north part of Kenmore makes it difficult for fixed route service to be efficient, because you don't live on the right street. And it's difficult.
Yeah, I understand. I guess, yeah, I'll ask more questions when you're done. Yeah.
I'm going to hand off to Luke to talk about our outreach coming up.
Yeah, great, thanks. So we're now into phase 3, which is our final phase of engagement. In phase 3, we're really looking at the network as a whole. So in our phase 1 engagement, we talked to the communities about what are their priorities and values and what they want to see built into the network. In our phase 2 engagement, we really look at route by route engagement. So it's a bit more detailed. It's kind of a dense survey to get through, but we want that really detailed feedback on where people are traveling, what streets, what pathways that really help us refine the network. As we go into phase 3, we're really looking at the network as a whole. So can you find your route? Can you find your connection? Can you get from where you are to where you need to go? Looking at this at a sub area or at a full network level. So we kind of take a step back and think about the whole project area and the connections that people need to make as opposed to just one route or 2 routes. So in our general public outreach, we kind of do this multi-layer cake where we do general public outreach looking at events. Summertime is actually a nice time to do outreach, not only for the weather, but when we were out here in January and February, there aren't as many community events. So in this phase, we get to go to 12 events this summer, including we'll be at the Kenmore Farmers Market twice, Lake Forest Park Farmers Market twice, Bothell Sustainamania, and some other events that Kenmore residents may be at. In addition to that, we always go to the community centers, libraries for flyering. We do a lot of communications and social media. We'll have 3 online virtual open houses, and then we'll be doing outreach at transit centers and park and rides, again, including in Kenmore. One of the important things that we do is also engaging with our operators. They are the ambassadors for our system and who most riders engage with the most on a day-to-day basis. And they also see the network through a very different lens. So we make sure and have engagement with our coach operators as well to make sure that their feedback and their experience operating the system is also taken into account. Lastly, we also do some direct engagement with key communities. Those can be human and social services organizations, school districts, income eligible housing providers, and other organizations that represent and really work with our equity priority populations. Another element of our outreach is working with community-based organizations. So these are groups that we establish paid agreements with, and they mainly focus on doing outreach with priority populations to make sure that it's culturally appropriate, it's relevant. We're not always asking people to come to us, but we're having our engagement show up in spaces that organizations are already doing engagement in. We got a lot of great feedback from our phase 2 CBO partnerships that didn't show up in our survey, and that actually influenced a lot of the changes in the network from phase 2 to phase 3. So these are a really important area for us. And this is a picture from Lake City Collective when they do outreach events with some of the populations that they work with. So lastly, you know, I take every survey I can because I work in public engagement and I want to support my fellow public engagement professionals. But we really take that into account. So it's not only the questions on the network and the demographics, but when you see questions at the end of a survey about, you know, how are we doing on engagement, we really use those answers and implement them phase to phase. So one of the things we heard is that some people, you know, maybe in North Ballard or maybe out in Kenmore didn't make the connection to Lynnwood Link. They were like, that's really far away from me. How is my route part of that project? So in our alerts that we send out to 50,000 route subscribers, you know, we named now every single route that's part of the project area. So people will immediately see that and hopefully make that connection that their route is part of this project and they should come and provide feedback to us. Another thing is bus stop signs. When we looked at the data on where people learned about our project, 22% learned about our project from the signs that are physically posted at bus stops, which is much higher than I've ever seen before. So we increased the number of stop signs from 90 to 123, trying to take that into account, that many people on today's system are really learning about our projects out at the bus stop, not necessarily from Twitter or from a mailing list. Lastly, King County Metro also updated the website recently, or the whole county did, and we actually got a new feature where we can put a banner across the Metro homepage. And so some of our project pages get really deep in the website. There's a lot of layers of schedules and maps and blogs and just different things. And so having that banner right across the Metro homepage for the next month should help give us some increased visibility on the project as well. I did mention that as we move from sort of this route by route engagement back to the whole network, we've tried to simplify things even further. I don't want to say provide less detail, but sometimes things can be really, really dense. And if you provide just a wall of text, it's not the easiest thing for people to work through. It's not easy to translate as well. And we have materials available in 11 languages. So we really try to take that into account now. And we've simplified our route sheets to really be, a map, a frequency chart, and the key 5 to 8 destinations that route goes instead of 3 paragraphs of text. And with that, our survey is also a bit more simple. So if you answered all the questions related to the network on our survey, I think it would be 6 questions, and then plus demographics and engagement work. So we're hoping that people also find our survey a bit easier to move through and provide feedback, because it shouldn't take anywhere near as long as having people provide feedback on 12 routes or however many they wanted to in the last phase. So we opened our engagement on July 10th. So just a week ago, I think I saw we have over 650 survey responses just in that week. And that's really just with our announcement. We are starting all of our in-person engagement on Wednesday with our first event. And then our in-person transit rider engagement really starts next week and will run for about 4 weeks. So we haven't even started, and we've already had a lot of engagement, and that's really great to see, and especially seeing some positive results. So I know in Kenmore as well that we've reached out to some organizations that you recommended in our last phase. I think the Kenmore Bothell Chamber has already been doing some communications on it. We'll be reaching out especially to some organizations in that North Kenmore Flex area to try and get their feedback incorporated. And we did post of those additional stops that we added signs at. A lot of those are in that Flex area, because we really want people who who don't have transit service right now to get to our project, see this proposed Metro Flex area, and get their feedback incorporated. I think that's it. I think we're happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you so much for coming and providing these updates. I have a couple of comments, questions, and just feedback. So first, can you just confirm what the estimated rollout start date or timeframe is for this? I see Q1 2024, you're presenting to King County Council. So what would be like the estimated timeline of when these changes would roll out?
The fall 2024 service change for us is like late August.
Late August. Okay, thank you. And then I am also very happy to see the expansion of Metro Flex to North Kenmore. Thank you for listening to our feedback on that. And in particular, and additionally, I'm really happy to see that you mentioned that there would be connection between the North Kenmore service and the Juanita area. I think that's really key for us, for it to be usable and practical. And then I really appreciate the project goals that you listed, and think there are excellent areas to focus on. 2 things that I feel like our residents and our ridership really values that isn't specifically mentioned in those goals are reliability and speed. And those are 2 areas where I feel like if we can't depend on that, people are not going to ride transit. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, you know this, and I know you have very difficult jobs to balance all these needs, but those are so critically important for us to increase ridership. And then my final two points are actually questions, and that is, we've been doing a really good job as a city, I think, to improve multimodal transportation and connectedness with our bicycles, our bicycle lanes, pedestrian facilities. And what I'm wondering is, does King County Metro have plans to increase bicycle parking at some of the stops? And yeah, just along these routes? I guess that's my first question, and then I'll have a second.
Yeah, I think I would have to check back on the bicycle parking, but I know definitely looking around like, Kenmore Park and Ride area, seeing that as a mobility hub as well. So I think seeing, bicycle parking is part of that as well. I know is already in the thinking. So.
I do know we have a mobility hub program that at different locations, and that is focused on making places where a lot of bus riders come to, places where you can store your bike, places where you can drop off, kiss and ride, and attracting multiple modes of getting to transit. So that's a program. The other thing I would say is that Metro has always been very committed to bikes. You may not know this. We were the first transit agency to put bike racks on a bus. And we had 2 bike racks on a bus, and then we decided we needed to have 3, so we added 3. We forgot to ask the state, so we got in trouble for like 5 minutes. But it was okay. But we've always been very committed to bikes. One last thing I would mention is we recently changed bike lockers from a monthly rental, which was not very much, to many of them to a hourly rental, which I believe is 5 cents an hour. And we believe that we're going to get much more turnover from those bike lockers with a 5 cents an hour thing rather than people who just sign up for them and then don't use them. That doesn't help, so we're really interested in any things we can do to encourage bikes. I should have let Luke take that because he still bikes to work and I stopped, but
I'm locked up in front of City Hall right over there by the ballot box. So.
Okay, we're glad you're using our bicycle racks. And then my other question, this is sort of tangential, but I'm curious because I haven't heard very much mention about technology when it comes to the transit system. And what I'm wondering is, has there been any talk about being able to track your bus status in real time, like on an app? And if so, what's the status of that?
Yeah, so there are a number of third-party apps that already provide that service. So like Transit app being one example, Pantograph. So those exist, and even some trip planners I'd have to look at, but a lot of trip planners also show the real-time bus location as well.
For all of King County Metro?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
all of our new buses are fit with GPS. So like apps like One Bus Away and others, you can track those. If a few buses may still not have the GPS, if they're older buses, those are tracked by the little things that sit on top of some of the street lights and stuff. A bus passes a certain point, and that's how we used to be able to tell whether our buses were. But now they're almost all GPS.
Okay, so there's no free service, or is there?
Those are free as well.
Several.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Google Traffic, One Bus Away is a local one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Shrubnik.
Yeah, thanks again for coming and talking about all this. I had some specific questions about specific routes. So the 72, well, and just to preface this, I'm a transit geek. I rode the 372 for about a decade and then rode the downtown buses for another 2 decades. So I'm very much into transit. So the 372, soon to be 72, do we know what the difference in, to Councilmember Kugler's point, time to the destination? Is it more or less same?
Yeah, like a lot of time of day estimates we had from Sound Transit's plans of both Stride and Link is that it was faster during a lot of times a day, particularly when you're looking at off peak and there's more frequency on the 2 than the 372 today. So it's generally about the same or faster at most times that we found.
Okay, that's good. And then to Councilmember Kugler's other point, reliability. So I've been down to the bus stops. The 320 is suspended. The 322 is typically canceled, even during peak. And I guess my question is, what's the light at the end of the tunnel? When do we think we're going to have resolution of, and I know you have staffing problems. I know that, and it's been in the paper. I totally hear that. But I'm curious what you think the light is at the end of the tunnel. And my concern is that without timeliness and reliability, we are kind of, I fear we're in a little bit of a death spiral here, that, you know, there'll be fewer and fewer people who are willing and interested to ride transit if we can't fix these problems. And I just, you know, we're building out not only bike and ped routes, but, you know, our entire transit-oriented development area is predicated on the assumption we're going to have frequent, rapid transit. I mean, these are large changes we're making as a city. And I guess I can't overemphasize the concern I have about making these kinds of decisions on zoning, parking, without a clear sense of when we're going to get to fast, reliable transit.
Well, that is a struggle that we are all dealing with right now. And the mayor has spoken many times at Seashore and other forums about his personal experiences riding the bus. And we recently announced, as you know, in September that we're going to pull back some of our service. Prior to the pandemic, Metro was very proud to deliver well over 99.5% of our scheduled trips. Lately, that's been, you know, closer to 95%, I believe. And so we were just randomly canceling trips according to workforce problems. And so what we're doing is we're kind of temporarily right-sizing our system so that if a bus is scheduled, it's not, we shouldn't see very many cancellations there. And we did that by canceling some commuter routes because commuter routes have not bounced back as fast as all-day routes in the pandemic, and by also missing a few trips on very frequent buses so that to lessen the pain. But we realize, especially in areas like Kenmore, that can be a painful decision because you may only have a handful of buses. So we tried to, in doing that reset, make sure people had another alternative. Might not be as quick, but we tried to make sure most people had an alternative within 6 blocks that they could get to. So trying not to leave people high and dry. And the goal is to work our way out in the next year or two through workforce problems. We have doubled down on recruitment. We have doubled down on our training classes, offering a lot more training. And we're trying to do everything we can. I would say every transit agency in the country is experiencing a lot of the same challenges. But we do believe we can restore that service, and there will be a public process to bring back that service. And we'll want to be thoughtful about how we do that, because commuting patterns have changed with the pandemic. So we should be sensitive about you know, what people's real needs are then, you know, so.
Yeah, I can just note too, our proposal, you know, does assume restoration of kind of all hours that are suspended. So if workforce issues, you know, do persist longer, there is potential some aspects will need to be phased in as we get to the, you know, implementation of the route, so of the proposed changes. But since we have, you know, a little over a year from there, hoping there's a little more, you know, build up by the time we get to those changes.
Any other questions? I want to thank you for taking the time to come in today and for taking our feedback seriously. I really appreciate, especially the North Kenmore flex. That's going to be a wonderful addition, I think. I do want to echo Councilmember Shrubnik's comments around reliability. When somebody like me, who is a frequent transit user, loves Metro, been using it since I was a child, has to wake up every morning and actually check to see if the bus I want is running that morning, if I'm getting a little bummed out by that, like I can't imagine what a more casual transit users goes through some mornings when they think they have a ghost bus or something like that. But I do appreciate all of the trials and tribulations the last couple of years has put Metro through, and I appreciate that you're trying to fix that so that what we are running and what is advertised is what's showing up, for everybody. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. All right, Mr. City Manager, where's the fun?
Let's go to last Thursday. We had a fabulous summer concert at St. Edward State Park. And we had the Hawaiian music group first, and it was a huge crowd, bigger than we expected. We were able to park everybody, but it was a lot more cars to park than we thought. So there's definitely some pent up demand and really excited people. So we not only had the Hawaiian group, we also had a Brazilian musical group as well, and got a little dancing up front. So just a wonderful time. We had city booths there in the back, lots of people volunteering. Our city team just did a fabulous job in bringing that event together. So before Michelle shows the next slide, that also has to do with the concert. One thing I noticed this year for the first time was a number of electric bikes were there, and not just any old electric bike, but I saw a number of cargo bikes. In fact, wagon type bikes that can hold 2 or 3 kids. So Lauren and I were chatting with one of the moms that had her bike there, and she uses it to run daily errands, and it is a car replacement, at least for around here in Kenmore. And her husband wasn't there, but he's just as passionate about riding his e-bike as well. So I asked her if we could take a picture. She's a local Kenmore resident. Her name's Christy Dykes, and there she is. So, and she wasn't the only one there riding that kind of bike that night. So it was fun, and they didn't have to deal with the parking problem. So yeah, there you have it.
All right, thank you. Next up, public comment. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We'll hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when you confirm we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express approval of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. Please do not comment about pending development projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters, and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 3 guests wanting to speak on site. We'll take them in this order. Milton Curtis, followed by Sarah Hayashi and Tracy Benazinski. Mr. Curtis.
Hello, I'm Milton Curtis, living in Kenmore. I'm here to talk about art options that could have been done and the dilemma related to use of the City Hall for future art projects. There are many disadvantaged groups that have been discriminated against, including Black slaves, American Indians who died en masse from smallpox and bullets, the Chinese who built our railroads, Japanese during World War II, those with prison record, the LGBTQ community, recent immigrants, disabled people, homeless, hiring practices that discriminate based on age or being overweight, etc. I see a problem for the City Council if a second of these groups with legitimate concerns request to use the City Hall for art that represents their struggles. The council will have one of 2 choices. Option 1, allow the group to install art, which would be the most fair since you have already set a precedent. The problem is that if we keep adding art for every group that has been discriminated against, it will eventually look like a mini mart full of beer, cigarette, and junk food ads. Where would it stop? Option 2, refuse to let any other group install any art. This seems to be showing favoritism to one group over all others and seems discriminatory. What will be your rationale for not allowing another equally disadvantaged group to have space to represent their cause? The City Hall is a public space for the citizens and for the city work to occur. It belongs to the people of Kenmore. I don't believe it is appropriate for a single cause to be represented. I don't want it to look like a mini mart, and I don't want it to show injustice by only allowing one disadvantaged group to have art and excluding everyone else. Another issue is how fast the decision was made without time for consideration. I asked the city manager if the art on four corners of an intersection was impossible or just slower and more complicated. He said both options could be done. The original idea to have art on four corners of an intersection or art on the steps of the City Hall. When Sarah, the director of the Arts of Kenmore, presented at the June 5th meeting, she presented several benefits of this project, including letting four groups have representation. Over the years, other intersections could be used for art if more representation was requested. I strongly prefer that option over the present one. In your haste, I don't think you considered all the options in detail, and I don't think you considered all the ramifications of your decisions. You have created a conflict for a future council. I have a new request for the council. Please go back to the original proposal to put art on four corners of an intersection. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Sarah Hayashi.
Good evening, directors. Yeah, Sarah Hayashi, Kenmore resident, and Director of Arts of Kenmore. I am super excited to say that we have signed the contract. The committee, Kenmore's Urban Pride contract, has signed a contract with the city, and we have scheduled, allegedly or tentatively scheduled our community paint day for Saturday, August 5th. August 6th, this next day, will be professionals coming in and touching it up, like myself. At any rate, this is super exciting. As Milton Curtis pointed out, there is a secondary art project that will be coming along next year. All of these projects that have been considered and weighed are all in line with the city's 1% for the arts policy. I do not take any of these projects lightly. We examine them very carefully. They're also community driven and born out of the For the Love of Kenmore and Love Where You Live projects. Our job is simply to facilitate what our community wants. So I'm super excited for what is coming ahead of us, and hopefully we can just kind of level things out with opposition. Thank you so much. And thank you for all that you're doing for the arts.
Thank you, Ms. Hayashi. Tracy Benzinski.
Tracy Bonashinsky, Kenmore. In 2023, more than 550 bills that seek to limit the rights of LGBTQIA+ people and their access to essential resources like medical care have been introduced across the United States. 3 times the number presented in the whole of 2022, nearly 12 times as many as there were in 2018, and the 4th consecutive record-breaking year for total number of anti-LGBTQIA+ bills considered in the US. Many of these bills target transgender and non-binary people, particularly youth access to gender-affirming medical care, falsely claiming that they are protecting children from abuse. Whether or not these bills pass, research is clear that the political climate itself can have significant negative effects on the lives of LGBTQIA+ people, especially their mental health and well-being. It is not hard for me to make a connection between the national surge in anti-LGBTQIA+ legislation and the attempt in our own community to stop the proposed Rainbow Steps Pride art from being installed at City Hall. I don't believe the motivation behind them is so very different. The rainbow flag is not a dangerous tool to push a political agenda, but a symbol of inclusion that indicates to LGBTQIA+ people that they are welcome and respected. LGBTQIA plus people are not polarizing political subjects. They are actual people just trying to live. The pride flag doesn't represent a single institution, nor is it a dangerous tool to push a political agenda. It is a community-driven symbol of humanity and inclusion that can indicate to all people and sexual identities that they are in a welcoming and affirming space. You can't indoctrinate someone into the LGBTQI plus community, and queer visibility is a human rights issue, not an ideological one. Unlike a political organization, there is no central LGBTQIA plus organ, headquarters, or single representative from whom LGBTQIA plus people take orders. For these reasons and many others, the designation of pride flags as political symbols doesn't hold up. The argument only serves to pathologize and exclude queer and trans people and to galvanize others against a made-up enemy. Installing the Rainbow Steps Pride Art at City Hall is an opportunity for our city to affirm that LGBTQIA plus neighbors are welcome here, for people to learn about and acknowledge the history of the LGBTQIA plus community, as well as their current challenges, which are our challenges, and to help create the more inclusive and beautiful future everyone needs in order to thrive. Thank you for standing in solidarity with the LGBTQIA plus community by proceeding with the Rainbow Steps Pride Art installation. I appreciate your leadership on this issue. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Mayor Herbeck, I do not see any hands raised, but I'd like to do one more ask. If you're online, please raise your hand now if you're wishing to speak. I see we do have one hand raised. Stacy Valenzuela, can you hear us? Stacy Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with Milton Curtis again. Every child should see where they come from, what their nationality is, how they belong, not just one group. And I think I agree with that the corners would be the way to go, not the striping on the step. I also think that more groups should be included, Hispanic area, Asian American, and I think the groups would come forward if it is offered to them, including Persian and the different religions. And this was one of the things that came up when the discussion about the tree lighting was disallowed and condemned. So I would like to see that. In other regards, the residents want to see responsibility, accountability. We need the city to perform by staying within projected budget, to control overspending and stop costly mistakes and allowing financial burdens. When the council adopts an increase in cost, you are condoning the waste. We are failing to support the will of our residents. Expenses for enhanced services, street cleaning, et cetera, and consultants, when we have employees earning high wages, more than other cities, and full medical expenses for their full family is a burden on our budget. Our residents for years have requested testing of our air, water, and soils because we know there are toxic dioxins. It has especially been a concern for the asphalt emissions in the air and the sediment in our waterways. It's not just steam and fertilizer, wastewater, and overflow and stormwater runoff off cement is partially cause of the algae bloom. Are you not concerned that the water testing at Tolacha D spikes with every other testing? We also need you to look into, as well as with garbage, the other utilities and rents are so high on our seniors and those with disabilities that are on fixed income. When are you going to stop some of this taxing when 70% of our residents are cost burdened just in Kenmore? Lastly, actually, the residents also requested the town hall's return. How soon can we see this in action? And lastly, I request that all of you experience the 3-minute timer limit to remember just how quickly our residents' public comment time runs out. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela. Mayor Herbig, there's no additional hands.
All right, next on the agenda is the consent agenda, unless there's been a request from staff to remove item A. Councilmember Sherman?
Do you need a motion?
And now I think about it, I don't think we actually need a motion
Okay.
because all it takes is one of us saying that we want to remove it and I'll be that person. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item A.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The consent agenda stands approved. That brings us to item A from the consent agenda. Authorize city manager to execute contract number 23-C2929 with Cascadia College for catch-up learning proposals during the 23-24 academic year and summer of 24.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, we requested the contract be pulled just to highlight a very small change that was made to the contract today. Specifically in subsection 4A, and it is in your agenda now, but in 4A, what we did is we added the words on the third line and submitted to simply to clarify the ownership of certain documents. We wanted to make sure that documents that are submitted to the city are owned by the city, but those documents that relate to the students and the people teaching the students need to remain the ownership of the consultant, not the city. So it was really a clarification of who owns the documents. And that is it.
Okay, do we have any questions? Then the chair would entertain a motion to authorize the city manager to execute contract 23-C2929 with Cascadia College for catch-up learning programs to be provided during the 23-24 academic year and summer of 2024 in a form provided by the city attorney, last revised 7/17/2023.
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilor Marshall?
I don't think I can overstate how important, useful, and necessary this is to help those kids impacted by COVID. It was a frightening prospect to see our kids learning or trying to learn in this new atmosphere from home. And now we've seen, even as recently as today, I think some statistics showing this horrible negative impact. So I'm glad we're moving forward with these ARPA funds to get kids help and try to catch up.
Any other discussion? All right, will the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to authorize the city manager to execute contract 23-C2929 with Cascadia College for catch-up learning programs to be provided during the 2023-2024 academic year and summer 2024 in a form approved by the city attorney, revised 7/17/2023. Councilmember Shrebnick.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
Approved unanimously.
All right, next on the agenda is a study session, Republic Services update presented by Republic Services Sustainability and Community Relations Manager Wendy Weiker.
Your Honor, if I can do a quick intro before
Yes, of course.
Wendy starts. Wendy, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming tonight. We've been having some really great discussions with Republic Services over the last few months. They've been really responsive and very much on board with our hopes and dreams when it comes to climate action and environmental stewardship. And so they've been a great partner, and we've been asking them some key questions about composting and more recycling and things like that. And of course, Wendy will also talk about the rate restructuring a little bit later in the presentation. But I just want to thank Wendy and your team for being such a great partner with us and helping us sort through and wrestle with some questions about how we can better help the environment. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for having me here this evening. Appreciate you guys taking some time to talk trash and organics and recycling. And I would be remiss if I didn't also return the favor. Your team is really great to work with in tough winter storms and managing state law and the daily work that we do in your city, picking up all manner of materials. So specifically, since I know they don't always get called out, I'd like to thank Rob Carlinzi, Nancy Meehan, Richard Sawyer, Lauren Chomiak, Jennifer Gordon, Michelle King. They're just wonderful to work with. So can't thank you enough for their leadership on your behalf and on behalf of all the residents in Kenmore. So let's see, I'm a little rusty. It's been a while since I've been in person. Thank you for being here in person. Can I just tell you next slide? Space bar. Ooh, there we go. Okay. So first I'm going to level set with you guys. Some of you I know have been around a while and know about how garbage regulated by the UTC works, and probably are talking to some of your peers. In some locations, we have contracted service that changes every 8 to 12 years. In Kenmore's case and several other cities, your service and our relationship is overseen and governed by the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. So in your spare time, if you really have nothing better to do, there's a website you can go and read all about this system and everywhere it works and all the different companies that are partnering with cities to do this important essential service, as well as the planning for climate action. So specifically tonight, Rob and your staff asked me to address these 6 key questions. So I'm giving you a preview of coming attractions. We're going to talk about the possibility of mandatory organics collection for your single family residential customers, your multifamily residential customers, and commercial properties. We're also going to talk about the possibility of mandatory recycling collection for multifamily and commercial properties. We're going to talk about the possibility of mandatory garbage collection for your single family residential customers. And we're also going to talk about the status of the King County disposal rate restructure process and how that's going to be worked with the UTC. There's no council action required there. Preview of coming attractions. It is rather complicated, and as you're out in the world talking with your peers, I want you to kind of know what everyone's talking about and how this is going to work in Kenmore. We're also going to talk about the status of Kenmore's utility tax implementation that you guys passed, and revenue is now headed your way to do that climate action work you wanted to do. And finally, I'm going to reiterate some of the education outreach work that we're doing with Kenmore in support of our shared commitment to King County's REPlus work that you heard about. And I believe you passed the pledge unanimously. And my colleague, Natalie Calkins, who was here in April, has done a lot of work, and she has moved over to an operations role in our company. So as soon as we have someone else hired, I'm going to have her or him get introduced to your staff. We're this close to hiring. So space bar. Here we go. So high level again, I just want you to know that we have a shared commitment to climate action, as you do. Era Public Services, we're in 48 states. We run collections, we run disposal, we run recycling centers, we run organics facilities. We know how to do this work locally, regionally, statewide, and at scale. And we've seen throughout the country that a lot of our cities are committed to climate action in various ways that they can, depending on the size and scale and capacity they have to do that work. So the key themes we've seen around reducing greenhouse gas emissions, electrifying fleets, doing water and land conservation, having smart waste programs, zero waste efforts, circular economy efforts, and making sure any new building we do is energy efficient to the highest standards we can. So this is just my reminder to you guys that we're in this work together, and my company's committed to it, as are our cities, and we can't do it alone without public-private partnerships. All right, back to the meat of the matter. So the biggest priority, it sounds like, for your council, given your climate action work, is this mandatory possibility for yard and food waste organics collection. And it's absolutely possible in all 3 streams by ordinance. And how this would work is once you pass the ordinance and decided which levels of service you would want and how we would sort of do some enforcement around that, we would work with the UTC to figure out how that would impact Kenmore customer rates. And here's where I should interject that state law is coming this way anyway. I don't know if many of you have heard about the organics law that was passed in 2022, House Bill 1799. Organics expansion is coming one way or the other. So at the state level, the UTC is looking at this with all the franchise areas. So it's coming. It's just probably going to take a little bit of time. We need a lot more facilities to process the material that we're talking about statewide. And here in King County, we also need some more infrastructure to support that. So permitting, land use, neighbors. that's coming on a much bigger scale. But for Kenmore, if you guys wanted to kind of accelerate that schedule, we could certainly do that via ordinance with a lot of math on the back end. And there's a question.
And Wendy, you may have these numbers later on in your presentation, so forgive me if I'm getting ahead of you, but I remember from our meetings, you mentioned, so on the single family residential, there's about 6,200 customers on single family residential, and about 4,400 of them sign up for yard waste. So that leaves about 1,800 single family households on the table who do not sign up for yard waste and therefore are not composting their food waste. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if there were some low hanging fruit here on like passing an ordinance, I think this could be one of them.
Because most of your residents are already doing it and want it. So, yeah, I have those numbers later, but.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for interjecting, because that would not be hard to do, given that a lot of your residents are already doing it. And those that aren't, we could certainly do some education outreach. It's voluntary at the moment. If you made it mandatory, we would just figure out how to get to those few that might not want it, and would maybe have some words to say to the city about not wanting it and not wanting to pay.
Great. And then are you also going to talk about the number of multifamily properties that are not composting?
I'll give you a sneak preview. There are 82 of them. So yes, I have that number later.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Sorry about that.
No worries. No, that's good. So we can absolutely get there. And the challenge would be then is the bill that would come with it. So it's right now it's an opt-in service. If we made it mandatory, those that don't want it would have to do it. We would bring them a bin, and whether they used it or not, they would still be paying for it. But we would hope if folks are paying for it, they would use it. Single family, it's a cart at the curb, pretty easy to implement. Multifamily is a little more challenging. For the 82 multifamily properties, we would need to figure out through ordinance, maybe a couple of varieties, 96-gallon cart, 46-gallon cart. What is the size that we think we would need, and could we work with the residents to give them some choices in that multifamily area? Some properties in other locations have one cart per dwelling. It depends if it's a large number of units or a smaller number of units, and then changing over time if more people use the service, or downsizing the container if they weren't using it as much as we thought. And then same with commercial yard waste, we'd have to figure out what level of service the city would like. Mr. David Baker.
Councilor Baker.
Yes. I'm looking at this here and I'm wondering, are we talking about bringing waste in-house where we negotiate the contracts? Because I see some things here that reminded me of a discussion we've had a few years ago, where you had said, no, we shouldn't be doing this. Where we're setting what level of service we want. And there's a number of things here, looks like you're talking about having us set levels. And what did I miss on that page then?
These are things you could do by ordinance and not necessarily things that you would only be able to do through a franchise agreement.
So to expand on that, Councilmember Baker, the UTC would take the ordinance that you guys passed, and then we would work on the rates with them to make this service a unique opportunity for Kenmore residents under the UTC jurisdiction.
But I'm seeing where you're recommending 96-gallon containers for one thing.
That's just the standard size we use in other jurisdictions. For
Yeah,
those
we've
properties.
reduced our level of garbage and we use 12-gallon. I don't want to go back to 96. Costs too much.
It does indeed. So, but this is organics or garbage. So we can talk about those different varieties and service levels you would want to present to your citizens.
Okay, so we're
but
not
it's-
talking about bringing it in-house.
No, that takes 6 to 10 years, and the UTC system actually is pretty transparent and pretty robust in terms of consumer protection and the robust process that's undertaken anytime we have a rate increase. And we'll talk about that when we get to King County disposal, because that'll be part of that conversation.
Wendy, if I could just interject. So you mentioned the 82 multifamily properties. From what I understand, of those 82, only 2 are providing residents with the ability to compost their food waste. Those are my notes from a meeting I had. Is that correct?
My notes too. Yes.
Okay, so think about that. So right now, it's a voluntary thing for multifamily complexes to offer food waste recycling, and only 2 of our 82 are offering it. And so folks who live in multifamily apartments, so just one side note, my daughter's going to Western Washington University. She lives in an apartment complex in Western. She's so conscious about it that she keeps all of her compostables and then rides them on her bike up to campus when the bag gets full. So we might be so the folks that live in apartments here in Kenmore might, I mean, that's their option, right? If they can't, they want to throw it in the garbage, they're gonna have to do something similar to what my daughter's doing. So.
And I think the organics law that was passed, it's going to probably have another iteration. This next legislation will induce more multifamilies to participate eventually. So if Kenmore wants to move faster on that, we can. And just so you know, we reach out to multifamily customers every year to talk about their service and remind them that composting is an option. So we've done a soft touch outreach on that. So if the city council did want to move forward with a mandatory organics for multifamily, we would certainly want to design a robust customer engagement process with that, probably over a significant period of time to educate people why it's important, what it's for, and the good that it does for the environment, given the cost and given the level of service that you guys deem appropriate for your residents. So yeah, organics, lots of opportunity there.
Before you move on, sorry, Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, thanks. So I think what I heard you say is you think maybe the legislation would still be 2 sessions away and then there'd be an implementation phase. So it could be a while. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes and no. So we
Okay.
have an organics law that was passed in 2022 that
Okay.
requires organics collection for the largest producers now, so hospitals and school districts.
Okay.
They're coming in first. A lot of them are
Okay.
already doing it.
Yeah,
So,
sure. Okay.
and this is commercial food waste, not yard waste.
Yeah.
So it gets rather challenging. I've been doing this
Yeah.
for 4 years now, and I still take a minute to try to get it all straight. So the commercial food waste is one thing. The multifamily organics is
Is
sometimes
another.
food waste and yard.
Okay,
waste,
so my
depending on the
second,
property.
so my second question then is on the multifamily organics. What do we think would be the cost to I assume it's the cost to the owner, correct, of the dwelling, which I'm sure would be passed down to the tenants. And so I just want to have a sense of what we're talking about here.
So that's data I don't know because it
Okay.
would depend on kind of the parameters you'd want us to do that
Okay.
sort of guesstimating on and then working with the UTC to determine what would be a fair and reasonable.
Okay,
rate
yeah,
for the
I really want
service.
this to happen. I'm concerned about the impact on the tenants.
Well, and I think staff,
So-
we've been talking this for at least a year. And then this is my first time in front of you really kind of digging into the weeds, literally. So with some soft direction, I think we can keep working on this and I can go back and start working with your team on some potential numbers and what that might look like. And again, property management, whether it's an HOA for ownership or whether it's property managed with apartments, there's a different kind of outreach and a different level of enforcement and compliance and education outreach. And there is a cost, Councilmember Baker. So yeah, so reminding folks about the need to do it, the requirement to do it, and the benefit of it is certainly all part of that process. And the cost is certainly a critical part of that. The economics matter for the residents who are paying it or the property manager that passes it forward through new leases or whatever, holding back of current things. And I don't know how much time I have, so I'll just keep talking.
You're fine. Councilmember Baker has a question though. Councilmember Baker.
Okay.
So I know I served on SWAC for 7 years, and one of the biggest problems of trying to get the recycling rate up to 70% was in multifamily, there's no space for the third container that's needed.
You're absolutely right about that.
And so what's being done?
So I currently
Can't
serve on the
rebuild
SWAC. Yeah, no, that is a challenge and it depends. So new construction, we are working with cities when they bring permits and zoning forward to try to make room not only for the 3 bins we know we're going to need going forward, but also the truck access. We also have a challenge with properties being built that don't think about garbage trucks, recycling clubs, or organics trucks coming through. So yeah, thinking about this essential service is critical at the planning stage. For multifamily properties that are already there, some properties have bins for certain clusters of buildings or certain duplexes, big kind of 7-story buildings. We try to find some space for a bigger container. I know some new construction, they're requiring 3 different chutes now in their design because you can't just put organics down the same chute as recycling because it contaminates the recycling. So that's a perennial problem in the industry, and we're working with the builders to try to get there and permitting departments to try to remind them of the access that trucks need to turn around and that residents don't always want to drag carts out to a curb or out to a central spot. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's still a challenge and new construction is getting better, but the older constructed buildings, we still have to work on that, which requires more education outreach and trying to keep it as simple as possible. So in some cases, we have more bins rather than big containers where residents can bring their material.
Yeah, along with the council member, I also think it's very important. This is something I want to see done. I mean, I've been working, trying to raise that level back to close to 70% for a number of years, and we're just not really making that much headway. So I'd love to see you guys figure it out.
So we are getting there, and statewide, we're at 50%, so that's pretty good. And I can talk about our recycling center in Seattle, and would love to get anyone out to the South Seattle neighborhood to see our recycling center for anyone that wants a field trip. Back to the questions at hand. So the possibility of mandatory commercial recycling, you can also do by ordinance. So for your commercial properties, this service would be open to all of the companies that do this work so that your commercial properties would have a choice. So all of those companies would report back to you on the materials they're collecting and the levels of contamination they're seeing at the recycling centers. But open market is what we call this commercial recycling in the UTC areas that cities want by ordinance. You would just you would pass it by ordinance, and then the service providers would give anyone who calls them their service levels and their pricing, and we would work together with those property owners to get that service done. It would not be regulated by the UTC, but the city would have to help us and whichever other service providers do the work, figure out how to enforce this mandatory requirement. So we could you probably know who your commercial properties are. You could figure out who's serving which properties. You would get the data. And then we could figure out which ones aren't in compliance. You could ask us to make sales calls. I don't know, have us all out to Earth Day, doorbelling, I'm not sure, but to bring them into compliance would require some level of collection about who's not complying and then going after them to get them to comply. Okay, the possibility of mandatory single-family garbage collection. Yes, single-family residential garbage collection. The city would have to determine the service level options. Again, what size cart for how much money. We would work through those rates with the UTC, and the city would have to help us with the enforcement mechanisms. We would need to have the ability to stop service for non-payment. And the city would need to determine what kind of compliance reporting and enforcement for residents would be required to pay and then stop. And then some cities have fines connected to not being in compliance with the ordinance. Others tie it to water and sewer service, cutting it off. You know, carrots and sticks work, but at some point, if you want to get compliance, we need to figure out how to reach people and bring them into the service. So it's absolutely possible. The good news is I think most of your recycling customers do collect garbage. So I'm not sure that there are many people that are collecting that aren't already using garbage. So this also would be, I think, a pretty unpainful ordinance for you guys to pass for your residents.
So one way we can figure out how many are not signing up is recycling is a requirement. People are required to sign up for recycling and pay for it. And so I think what you said last time we met or a couple times ago was we have 6,275 recycling accounts and 6,267 sign up for garbage. So that's about 10 single-family residential accounts citywide that don't sign up for garbage out of 6,000.
And those folks might be self-hauling to a transfer station. So, yes, it's not very many people that aren't also getting garbage service.
Councilor Shipley.
So, I mean, this kind of cuts both ways then, I suppose. I mean, I think we did, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we did talk as a council about having some exception for people who are self-hauling to transfer stations. So I'm not sure how this would relate to that. And I guess to me, 10 people who are not complying unless they're burning their garbage, which is another ordinance that they would be violating. Is it worth making an ordinance? So I guess I have mixed feelings about that. So.
There are various levels of garbage collection that we could make available to Kenmore residents. So there's monthly, small, gallon. I mean, so we would have to figure out the details and figure out the pricing and work with the UTC. But in terms of passing the ordinance to make it required and mandatory, all your residents are pretty much doing it. So the 10 that aren't, we could figure out why and maybe provide them the smallest monthly service.
Right. And I guess to make my statement more simple, we need to have a problem in order to want to solve it, I guess. And I guess in this case, I'm not necessarily seeing the problem.
I don't know that you need it, right?
Councilmember Marshall and then Councilmember Baker.
In a rare exception, but one which we might want to provide for, is it possible to have something like a reduced rate for shared garbage services between two neighbors or two next door neighbors who have a smaller container?
That might be challenging with our billing system. So I would imagine one neighbor would pay for the service and then pay their neighbor direct. I don't know how that would work, but yeah, they could certainly do that. This might be a solution looking for a problem. So we're agnostic. I'm just presenting the information, and it's possible and it might not be necessary, but we could focus on the organics and recycling going forward, since that sounds like it's more of a interest and urgency and long-term frustration for Councilmember Baker. So happy to do that. And there's a lot of work happening in that space anyway.
Sorry. 1 second, Councilor Baker, and then I think the deputy mayor had a question.
So it looks like there's a lot of things here that need to be worked out about. It looks like you changed the slide. Can you go back one to where? Well, anyway, it looked like we had to decide penalties for people. You'd have the ability to stop service for non-payment. We'd need to determine compliance reporting and enforcement, to pay to restart the service, and what kind of city fines would be. But would we have the ability to change providers? If we didn't like the service level we had agreed upon, could we change providers?
Not
or
under.
Are we locked into it?
Not under the UTC model.
Are you talking about like residential garbage service and things like that? Yeah, so if the city wanted to get in the business of regulating solid waste collection, we'd have to give notice, and it's usually like 7 to 10 years notice. And then we would go out to bid and do a whole process, and then we would become the regulator. And
so under what I'm seeing here, we would have to determine service levels, enforcement mechanisms, and all this other stuff. And then we would have to rely on Republic to actually do the work of what we all agreed upon. But if there's an issue, we can't get rid of the provider. we have to wait 7 to 10 years to be able to do that. So it's,
True, but you could also, there's also the UTC that regulates and enforces what's there.
So Councilmember Baker, let me tell you that customer service is our #1 priority in addition to safety. So customer complaints we get now in Kenmore, we take absolutely seriously. And our call center doesn't know whether you're a contracted city or a UTC city. We take all customer complaints through our call center with 26 local representatives, and the escalator, instead of your city staff, which also hear from customers who are unhappy, is getting to the UTC Customer Service Center as well. So you have double protection under the UTC because it's not just staff or public dialogue about a customer service issue. You also have the UTC overriding all of that. So the UTC manages this statewide from my first slide. So all of the service providers have some UTC area one way or the other, and we all have the absolute commitment to customer service. And if we miss a pickup, if there's someone going on vacation, if somebody's moving and starting new service, customer service one-on-one, day in, day out, we're in your neighborhoods with 2 or 3 different trucks daily. So customer service is key, and customer safety and community health and safety, absolutely. So I can assure you customer service is not lacking with your current service provider.
Can I add on to that, Your Honor?
Sure.
Yeah, so I kind of feel like we're having our cake and eating it too right now in the current situation, because we have a really good working relationship with Republic. And if there ever is an issue, we have a direct line to them, and they are very responsive and handle things right away for us. The communication is great. If there ever is an area where they might need to suspend service for whatever reason, which is rare, they're always proactively communicating with us and letting us know. So I feel like we have the local control and the communication and the customer service without the burden of regulating solid waste, which is a burden. I've done it before in a prior city, and it's a lot of work to become the regulator of solid waste. So.
Deputy Mayor and then Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, I have kind of a follow-up to Councilmember Shrubnik's question about exceptions. And I've been a long-term yard food waste user. I'm trying to remember what year it was that it was passed in Seattle, but since that point I was using it, which feels like over 20 years ago. I have no idea. What I can attest to is the benefits of it, the reduction in waste in my house immediately. In the house I live in now, I have 2 kids. Well, I'm actually back to 2 kids in the house again, but there are 3 of us, and we have, just a small garbage container. And so I absolutely am thankful for the ability to manage organic waste as we do. My question about making it mandatory is, especially now that so many people are engaging in like home farm, or, growing their own food and chickens and composting. What about people who are already composting or have something? Would that be an opportunity? Is there a way that we could have an exception for those customers that are already managing their waste on site? Or I was just thinking about that expense in the same way.
Yeah.
As much as I think it's a benefit, and I really am thankful for this, I kind of like the 10 customers, that 10 customers is not as much as maybe there's the bigger gap, right? For yard waste and garbage collection that you were describing. So I just kind of was curious, do you think we could have some form, when we make it mandatory, that's mandatory for everybody, and that's an expense, but maybe it's did I understand correctly, a tiered approach? I'm just trying to figure out.
A tiered approach for organics, right?
Yeah, for organics.
I don't know. I guess we'd have to figure that out with the UTC, because I don't know how you would prove that somebody was doing backyard composting.
Right.
But like, we're not going to peek over fences, and I don't know that they'll tell us, but I don't know. I'd have to look into that when we get there. But I know organics collection, we could again have various levels of service, and the state's going to bring it down on us anyway over time soon enough. So I know 1799 is following California's 1383, and Republic is the #1 organics processor down there. So we've had this learning curve for the last 5 years, and I've been down to see some of the facilities. It's massive, the material that comes in. So whether it's collected at the curb, currently it goes to Cedar Grove, Len's up in Snohomish County. These facilities are incredible. So rows and rows of dirt that used to be twigs and a little bit of food waste, not so much, but adding food waste to the organics. Some facilities I think will be really good at it, but the food waste has so much potential contamination in it and decomposes at a slower rate than twigs and branches and grass that in California, there's a whole separate stream for the food waste coming out of grocery stores and restaurants and cafeterias that that's going to require different trucks and different processing. And it's cool because that material ultimately ends up at wastewater treatment plants to make them more efficient, or it ends up at anaerobic digesters that create electricity, or they end up in compost facilities where the sludge is complementing and accelerating the compost facilities that make dirt. So it's all a copacetic system that ends up complementing each other, but collecting the streams at the front end and helping with the education and outreach. There are some cities in California, the ordinance was passed, the laws are down, the enforcement is starting to come, and they're opting out. So we need cities to be on board with it too. And I gotta say, I'm super impressed with Kenmore being so far ahead on this climate action work and even having this conversation and wanting to go faster than 1799, because we're all getting there. And especially here in King County with the landfill reaching its capacity in a few too short years, which is why we're getting to the rate restructure next. But we all have to work together, not just for climate action, but for our own county landfill that's reaching capacity. And we don't have a solution yet. And we are a growing region with so many people coming, there's just more and more waste. So we can talk about packaging, we can talk about recycling. Organics is a key piece of that work that finally is starting to get the attention that it didn't even 5 years ago.
I really appreciate your response, and especially in two things: the reminder that it is upcoming state legislation. We're really not going to have much choice. The reason I brought it up is over the years, I've heard residents asking questions or speak about that they're taking care of their waste and they don't want it mandated. So that's the main reason that I asked the question. I'm also thankful to be living in Kenmore, where we are moving ahead on our climate action plan, and in a region where organic collection is pretty much the standard. When I remember 10 years ago spending time in California with friends who didn't have, yard, food waste mixed in at that time. So, it's good we're moving in the right direction for this. And I'm so thankful for the work you're doing and that you're here today. Thank you.
I'll tell you, some cities in California aren't even recycling. If that's not shocking. Anyways, back to the organics discussion. Rob, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a comment and then a question. Yeah, so it's eye-opening to see the difference between aerobic and anaerobic decomposition. So when you put your food waste just in the garbage and it goes to the landfill, it decomposes anaerobically without oxygen. And that emits heat trapping gases, greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. But if you do it through compost with your yard waste bin, it goes to Cedar Grove and it's oxygenated as it decomposes and much less heat trapping gases. So there's some really cool websites about it and some really great ways to educate the public on that. Because I think if we're to do this, the why needs to go with it ahead of time. Otherwise, it's what is the city making me do this for? So the why has to go, like, do you know the difference between aerobic and anaerobic and what it does to the environment? One question, as you can see, I'm kind of worked up about this topic. I love this topic. I don't know. We'll see in my next life. Maybe I'll do what Wendy does. I don't know. But the other question, I've heard talk about, so right now it's weekly garbage pickup and bi-weekly for recycling and yard waste. I've heard talk about that reversing. Can you tell me what you know about that?
No.
Oh, you haven't heard that?
No.
Oh, I don't know where I heard that. Never mind then. If you don't know, then,
Meetings you're going to, yeah.
yeah, okay, all
I know
right,
quite a bit, but yeah, that one's,
All
let me
right.
check into that and get back to you.
all right.
Councilor Shrubnik?
Well, that was kind of my question, actually. I've heard, and maybe city manager knows the answer. I've had several people kind of talk to me about our neighbor to Shoreline that uses Recology, I guess, and has weekly everything. And so that's kind of a desire. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I'm hearing this third hand, so I guess I'm looking for confirmation and what it would take to get there.
Shoreline is a contract city, so they've contracted with Recology to do the weekly service at a certain rate for a certain container. And this is why I'm here tonight. You guys have some flexibility about what kind of service you want and what levels. And we would just do it through the UTC rather than by contract. So even though you are a UTC city, there is some flexibility to customize the UTC service. So it sounds like organics is the top priority. Switching to weekly or switching every other week, I can find out about that. I wasn't prepared to.
Might have been through the county, the county solid waste master plan, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councilor File?
Thank you. One of the questions I have is related to, our community who doesn't have a lot of access to resources, financial resources. Right now, the opportunity is to take their items to the dump, straight to the dump, if they can't afford the regular garbage service. And what I often hear from our senior community and young families is there a low-income program? And there doesn't seem to be one that they're being able to access. And that's, kind of a difficult point. So if there is a shareable or link, we'd like to be able to share that with our community.
Well, you are ahead of your time. The UTC is looking at that possibility for that kind of a program now. And that program would have to go through the state legislature and then be part of the UTC offering. So we've been talking about low income rate or discount and how that would be funded and who would fund it and what that would look like to the other rates within the area. But that's coming. And I don't know if it's coming this session or the next session, short versus long, but when the time comes, I'm going to lean on you to send us an email and maybe show up to testify. Because that's a huge program that a lot of people are asking for as things get more and more expensive, especially here in King County.
Exactly. And that's something that's, that socioeconomic equity issue is so important to address across our region and across our state. So I really hope to see that it comes in the short session. If not, I definitely would volunteer to support the efforts. So thank you.
Councilmember Kugler?
I have two questions. One is related to like multi-family residential units. Just like how the billing is done. Like, is it done per unit or like every unit in that multifamily residence would be required to sign up and pay? Is that how it's done?
Depends on the property. So if it's a property managed apartment building, usually the property manager is determining the level of service and whether it's carts or big containers, depending on how we can service the property.
Okay.
And if it's condominiumized, that also depends. They might do it under the jurisdiction of the HOA or separately. And duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes are kind of unique from the larger proproperties with 30 or 40 units. So it depends.
Okay. And then,
But for your typical large apartment complex, the landlord pays the bill, right? Yeah.
okay. They probably have some sort of formula of how many people and residents and figure out how much to charge. Is that it?
Yeah, and I think they probably look at how much room is left in the recycling cart, for example. So if they have a lot of space, they'll downsize from the big container to several carts, unless there's not room for carts. So yeah, every property kind of has their own analysis and assessment. And our operations team is always happy to work with property managers to help them right size their service so they're not overpaying or contaminating by putting garbage in the recycle bin because the garbage is full and the recycle bin is empty.
Okay, and then the other question I have is, are there any locations where people can take their organic waste to somewhere?
Not that I'm aware of.
There's no other like model or option other than like at-home pickup?
Picking it up. I would have to ask our friends at Cedar Grove that question. And here's my plug for Cedar Grove. They have a facility in Everett and down in Maple Valley. So if you guys want to get to see their composting facility up close and hear more about their operations, I'd be happy to put you in touch with them and help Rob organize a tour of some kind. But I'm not aware of where you can drop off organics.
Okay,
if you
I
don't
just
have a
wanted to know what the options are, because I mean, my general feeling on this is I love the idea for the environmental benefits of it, but I do think there are a lot of households, especially like as our population ages, who might just be one or two seniors who don't create a lot of waste, who may not have yards. And I just feel like this could be a substantial cost for them that they're not really using very much.
don't have yards and but the food waste might be coming too, and that process will be here before long. And there are a lot of folks that have yard services, and those companies sometimes pick it up and take it away on their behalf. So in some locations, they might not want to pay for yard waste organics collections if they're already paying for a service.
Yeah.
So that's hard to solve for all the problems or all the possibilities, but we can do our best. And I think the need to divert from the landfill, as Deputy Mayor O'Kane said, is kind of an urgency, and it's coming by state law. So where we are in the timeline in Kenmore and how fast you want to move and how quickly you want to start the education outreach, we can work on that in the coming years. But as your partner in this work and your staff's clear commitment to it, and clearly your council's directive to do so, we're happy to do as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and keep the rates as low as we can while still providing the service that you want and that's soon to be required. So if you want me here till midnight, I could talk about this all day long.
Councilor Marshall?
Real quick, once upon a time, we could pick up cans and glass from the side of the road and get a refund. Any such program now, any way to bring it back?
Not yet, and bottle bills were kind of a thing of the past before the single stream recycling system came to be. And in fact, today I was just hanging out with the city of Bellingham at our recycling center, and they up to a year ago had source separated recycling, paper in one, metal in another, plastic in a third. And that was the last city in the state, I think, that had that service because of their small family service provider in the neighborhood. The recycling center closed. It took those separate streams. They ended up bundling it all together for the next year and bringing it to a single source recycling center like ours. The containers and the trucks just aren't filling up at the same rate. The manufacturer that takes it at the end isn't there anymore. So the system is kind of aggregating at a much bigger scale, and Bellingham moving to single stream recycling was sort of the last bastion of separated recycling. And the bottle bill you're referring to was 70s and 80s to try to get folks to return the bottles. With all the education outreach we've had on the West Coast, Oregon, Washington, and California, sort of promoting the blue bin, promoting empty, clean, and dry, promoting, the 5 materials we can take. I think the ethos and the psyche is there that we all want to recycle. The challenge now is that too many people want to recycle too many things that aren't actually recyclable. So now we have this balancing act of what we can actually take, process, and get to end markets for reuse versus not having a thrift store to take all the bikes and bowling balls and garden hoses that come through the recycling center.
City Manager?
Just Councilmember Marshall's question reminded me of something I saw when I was in Europe a couple months ago. I was in a grocery store and there was this like a vending machine type thing. And this woman was putting her plastic bottles in it. You saw that too? Yeah, she was putting her plastic bottles in it, and then she was getting like some either money or a coupon back or something. And so I couldn't resist. I asked her about it and how it worked and everything. And she could tell I was from the US, and she goes, "What, you don't have this in the US?" And I said, "Oh no." And she goes, "Well, that's a surprise," or something. She just was kind of shocked that that we didn't have that same system here, so.
That's a tough one. I know the last legislative session had the possibility of a bottle bill in the WRAP Act that didn't quite make it because it was such a huge bill, but we can talk about that some other time. But the bottle bill component would have been tough because it would have required folks to collect all their bottles, take it back to their store, get their money back. And then what about all the bottles that aren't taken back? What about the folks that can't get there? What about the companies that have to go get it and take it back and mix it back with the recycling center also? And more cars on the road, the inequity of being able to get the bottles back. Would the manufacturers charge that at the price for the bottle in the first place? Like, where is that cost actually going to land? And we couldn't figure it out together in a long session. So I think it's going to be a couple years, but I think that'll be part of the next discussion in 2025, because I hear in 2024, the legislature might be taking up this organics law 2.0 to kind of fix what they did in 2022. So you're going to be hearing a lot about that at K4C. You're going to be hearing a lot about that at AWC. You're going to be hearing a lot about that at the county level. Because all the jurisdictions are trying to figure out how to do better and do right by all these materials that are getting to landfills that we want to make sure get to reuse or don't get used at all. Bring your own coffee cup to Starbucks, bring your own bottle to fill up at the airport. And we were on a great trajectory until COVID hit. So COVID set us all back in so many ways in so many areas, including recycling. We were this close to banning plastic bags from everywhere, and then plastic bags were everywhere. So don't bag your recyclables. Okay, 9 o'clock. Let me get to King County's rate restructure because I'm sure you guys are hearing about that. First, let me just explain at the highest level, Kenmore resident rates through the UTC. There's a service component which pays for the trucks and drivers to come pick up the materials. And there's a disposal component, which is part of all of us being in the King County jurisdiction. So you have an arrangement with us to do the service. You have an arrangement with King County to be in there, interlocal with the landfill. I mentioned that landfill is filling up. King County is leading the state in zero waste and circular economy and this RE+ pledge. And so they, a couple years ago, came up with this solution to having infrastructure they need to maintain while at the same time trying to encourage less material crossing their scale, which is how they made money, right? So I try to explain this rate restructure as sort of your typical utility bill, your water bill. You pay for the pipes and then you pay for the amount of water that comes through. So this whole rate restructure is because the landfill is filling out while King County is trying to figure out what the next version of this county's waste is going to be for the next several decades. They needed to find a way that would sustain their infrastructure while also managing the volume that's coming through and trying to keep rates low, right? So they're trying to just cover their costs. And so they came up with a robust math equation that gives a fixed charge for each city and then charges by the tonnage that's coming through from the trucks that are in that city. So the good news for you guys is because you're a UTC city, all the haulers that have a UTC partner are working that out with King County at the UTC level. So there's going to be a whole bunch of rate restructure conversations and rate making conversations. So later this summer, early fall, we will all learn where this conversation is going to land. So I'm sure city managers are going to be tracking this. I'm sure mayors and council members are going to be hearing about it. But in your case, because the UTC is going to be doing all the negotiating and the checking of the math and the figuring it out by customer size of carts, we're going to learn about it when they get to it. So the termination is coming, and then what we think it's going to look like from the UTC level is rather than a line item on customer bills in Kenmore, that'll be this combined commercial rate, which is what Republic is doing with our contract cities. It's taking this fixed charge and combining it with the variable charge, and then just coming up with this disposal singular rate where the math is done on the back end, but the way it shows up on the bill is how it shows up now, which is this disposal rate. It's it's complicated. So I'll say it's taken 2 years, but it is all part of the long-term planning with the landfill. It is part of the RE+ pledge to get to zero waste and promote the circular economy. And once this takes effect on January 1st, 2024, it will be sort of the new standard for how the rates are done on the disposal side for Kenmore residents going forward. There's no going back once we cross this line.
And this is not intended to be a rate increase. It's supposed to be a
Revenue neutral.
revenue neutral. Yeah, so we shouldn't see much of a change in our garbage bills, correct?
You'll see the usual annual increase based on inflation and CPI, like you do for the service side, you'll see it on the disposal side. But the disposal rate here with King County will not be any higher than it would have been under the old model. It's just broken in half, essentially. That might be enough for you guys to sound articulate when you get to pick. Okay, so now for you guys. So good for you. Ooh, you passed a utility tax, 10% to support your sustainability work. Lots of cities do that. 10% is the good number because that helps support a position, it helps support the programming, and it helps probably not just with your materials management stuff, but your energy efficiency, your tree canopy, your bike ped stuff, speaking of Metro. So you're well in line with a lot of other cities doing the same thing. That billing started showing up in May, June, and July based on the billing system. And my understanding is we're getting the payments to you monthly, and that started in June. So the revenue is coming. And this is just to remind you that this utility tax is hitting the 6,200 garbage recycling customers in Kenmore and the 82 multifamily customers. So I don't know if you've heard much from anybody who might have noticed this on their bills. We haven't heard anything, and we're prepared to answer any questions that come our way from residents, but it's been quiet. So, and then you'll remember in April, my colleague, Natalie Calkins was here telling you all about the education outreach we're doing. We're still doing that. Outreach and education, we can't do this work without it because folks need to be reminded what to throw in which bin, where it is. We have tools for residents, for teachers. RecyclingSimplified.com gives you tools and information. I know you guys are part of the King County Climate Collaborative. There's a lot of talk about what we're doing regionally to maybe simplify the recycling list. So we all have the same items on our recyclables list and we all have the same color carts at the curb. You might hear about all of that. All of our education outreach focuses on the key things we all care about, which is landfill diversion, contamination reduction, and reaching our single family and multifamily audiences with the same information, but maybe approaching them with different tools, given the different containers they might have at home. And then there's a big component of this multicultural, multilingual audiences. So we recognize that and have translation services and work with C+C on doing outreach to different audiences where they want to hear from us, as well as inviting them to our education center down in South Seattle, anytime, anywhere, summer camps, sustainability teams in high schools, Rotaries, Chambers, Kiwanis, anybody who wants to come see our facility, doors are open. Anybody that wants us to come talk to them, we'll show up in person, we'll show up virtually. We're open to talking to anybody, anytime, anywhere about how important it is to keep this stuff out of the landfill. So that.
Councilmember File has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, of course, we have a local farmers market, and it's a wonderful opportunity to approach our community with, community outreach education on composting and recycling and proper disposal. I would invite Republic Services to participate in our farmers market, or if we need to look at program options, I'd hope that we can find a solution and working together.
Love to. So I'll work with Rob to figure out which one. We usually attend the sustainability farmers markets, whichever one has sort of that green focus. I mean, they're all green, but some are more focused on sustainability programs and others. So yeah, would be happy to follow up with your team on that.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
And on that note, I think when you folks were out earlier in the spring, my suggestion was to print a few hundred of these to have at every farmer's market. I don't think I'm seeing them yet. So that would be, I mean, that's super simple.
Yeah.
You know, just have something that people can take home because we don't have those. We never received them. So, yeah.
And the other thing we're doing too to minimize paper is to have a QR code too at the booths. So with Natalie's departure, we're a little short staffed at the moment. So there are 3 of us instead of 4 of us running around King County UTC areas. So we'll definitely bring those printed materials, and we can leave some at City Hall too, and libraries and community centers. So and all this information is on the website as well. So knowing what to throw where is key. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then Republic Services, we do this work locally, and we're also involved with the stakeholder process in this state for 1799. We're having our second meeting tomorrow. Anybody who wants to learn more about organics, there are 87 people who are getting on a call bi-weekly now to figure out what the next version of our organics law should look like. There's a lot of great presentations, a lot of great content. We're partners not just in the practice of this work, but in the policy of this work, because we know we have great goals, but it has to be based on the practicality and reality of the system as it is, and the threshold that people have to be willing to pay for it, and how we can do it at scale to make it as economical as possible. So we have lots of programs to respond to emergencies. We have lots of partnerships with hazardous waste. We have disaster response and encampment cleanups, whatever we can do to help with unexpected work on top of the expected work. And this is just a slide to remind you that Republic Services in our 48 states, we commit to this climate action any way we can with our cities that want to go as fast as you guys want to go, or as slow as we're doing it anyway. This plastic circularity, we saw there was a challenge with plastics having end markets. So we're building a polymer center in Las Vegas. It's going to take plastics from the entire West Coast, starting in Vegas and California, the bigger markets, clean and wash and sort all the plastics we collect into food grade plastics that manufacturers say they want, because they've made their own sustainability commitments, Coca-Cola, Target, other food processors. And when there's a gap, our company has the scale to be able to be the solution on the end markets, which helps with that circular economy. And with that, we're an award-winning company doing this work anytime, any place, anywhere. And on behalf of Kenmore, I also serve on the King County Solid Waste Advisory Committee, the Snohomish County Solid Waste Advisory Committee, the Washington Organics Council. My colleagues serve on the Washington State Recycling Association, Ecology's Recycling Development Task Force, and the Solid Waste Association of North America Washington Board. So our team is spread out to do the work daily, practically to pick up all the materials, and also making sure that we're helping with all the policy development and helping other cities and counties kind of move as fast as you guys want to go. So good for you guys being ahead of it. So I invite you to see Cedar Grove. I invite you to come to a recycling center. I'm happy to work with your team to support any initiatives or direction you want to go, or get more information before you make decisions. We're so proud to be your partner, and we're so pleased to work in Kenmore. Absolutely, we'll get to your farmer's market, and just happy to be a resource and appreciate the partnership we have with you through the UTC and our 2 staffs working together.
All right, any final questions, comments? All right, well, it looks like we got it all out of the way during the presentation. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Wendy. We really appreciate it.
Be here.
Next up, staff reports, town hall format discussion. Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, I'll come up to the presentation table.
Okay.
All right, so quite a while ago, you as a city council said, hey, we want to do a town hall. Because city council meetings are a little bit more one way, right? That people come up and comment, but you can't really respond. And so you've wanted that more of a forum where you can have that two-way dialogue. And I've just been dropping the ball. I haven't scheduled one for you. And so my bad, and I apologize. But before we do, I want to talk to you about when, where, format, what that would look like. Lauren Homiak, our communications specialist, is here to participate in the conversation and give ideas or thoughts. But I've heard from one or two of you that you'd be interested in like a round table format where there's round tables and maybe one council member at each table. If you did, would each table be topic specific or general? And would the whole thing be general, or would you want to do a town hall that's topic specific? So those are my questions. I'm just throwing them out and then you can respond and give us your thoughts.
No, I'll start. I'll say I stole that idea wholesale from Issaquah. I'll just be upfront with that. And from talking with some of their council members, it seems like it's been fairly successful. They've done programs where, I mean, they've been doing neighborhood ones and they have, they're a larger city, but they've been doing, they would start off with kind of an update on whatever the hot topic was from the city manager or the police chief or whatever. And then at that point, people would have the option to talk with department heads and council members at individual tables about specific issues that they were concerned about. Speaking for myself, I think it's more of a way to kind of have human-sized interactions with folks rather than kind of the, us versus them sort of dynamic. Because I think, when we meet with people at Coffee with Council, that's a great place to have a real, actual human conversation with somebody versus public comment and all of that. And I kind of see this as a way to bring that to a larger scale, maybe. And actually, I think it'd be nice to get our residents some direct access to some of the department heads when they have questions about public safety. They could talk to the chief for a little bit, or about transportation issues. They could talk with Mr. Vicente, or other issues that arise. That's just what I've been thinking. And I'd love to hear what other folks think. And also, I would suggest not in City Hall also, personally. I think getting out of City Hall would be good to change up the dynamic a little bit also. That's just, I don't know, that's just a thought I have, but I'm not married to it. Anyone else? Councilmember Shrubnik, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I pretty much 100% concur. I think the informal, I've really loved Coffee with Council. I haven't been able to go all the time, but I've really appreciated the opportunity, to have that informal discussion. And, even at one table where there's two council members, I mean, you end up having kind of side conversations and it's just great. And I just want, I'm assuming we've thought it through that we can have all 7 of us in a room kind of separately talking about separate issues, that's like, okay. Yeah, I think what Mayor Herbig talked about, I think that would be great.
Deputy Mayor.
I agree with both Mayor Herbig and Councilmember Shrubnik. There is one thing that I do think we should take under consideration. We haven't had a town hall and we've been asking for one for quite a long time. So I personally would be comfortable with starting with one in City Hall, but I think it's really important that we do outreach into our communities, at our schools and neighborhoods that are outside of City Hall, that show that we are reaching out in that way, in addition to creating space here. So I would be in support of getting something scheduled sooner than later for our community members. Thank you.
Councilor File.
Thank you. The town halls like this are very helpful, right? I've experienced them in different waves and formats. North Shore, for example, they'll do small town halls specific to one or two topics, and they meet out into the community at school libraries, for example. They start off with a discussion and then you break it into small groups. It's a very healthy and it's a very positive experience. And it's nice to have a little note taker in one of those groups, right, to report back to the staff. The same in municipal waves. There's a different dynamic that occurs when you're outside of City Hall and in a different community setting, whether you're at Inglewood Country Club or borrowing Inglewood High School's library or Arrowhead or whatever. These environments are a little less formal and a little softer, and they allow for a greater exchange, also a comfort level. And it's very much behavioral science focused, right? So I can appreciate taking this kind of an approach for sure. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall and Councilor Kugler.
Ask, I'm going to defer to the city manager because I don't know if he got quite how it was supposed to be structured or what we're.
Yeah, I can reiterate back what I think I heard, but Councilmember Kugler, did you want
to? Yeah, I generally agree with what our mayor said. I like the idea of the tables and I'm okay with it. I also agree with Deputy Mayor O'Kane that I think that like the speed at which we organize, I think is important. Like, I don't want to wait for the perfect location or the perfect date or time. I think we just need to plan it, get the date and time out to everyone and publicize it so people can prepare for it and attend. It would be great to organize like a series, but I could also see value of testing it first and kind of seeing if we like the format and the timing of it first before setting a bunch on a date, on a calendar, I mean.
Any other thoughts?
Okay, so if I can repeat back what I think I heard. So you are wanting to do the round table format, and at each table you would have the department and a council member there, a department head. So you could have the transportation table, and so you'd have John Vicente and a council member at that table, and then you'd have a public safety table with the chief of police and another council member at that table, and maybe a planning and land use and housing table and that sort of thing. Maybe a presentation at the beginning, just a 5-10 minute thing to kind of kick things off and get everybody's juices flowing. And then people can pick which table they want to be at. And then do you want to like give opportunity to rotate tables? Maybe
I think people can come and go as they want.
Okay.
I mean, my assumption is that people will come up with specific questions that they can get answered and then go to the next place if they want to. But that's
yeah.
I mean, I think the less formal we set it, like if we have like, okay, everybody, time to rotate, like that's, I don't think that's what people are there for. And maybe it's not by department, maybe it's by kind of larger topics, because I know like, I don't know, like parks might be an issue that we want to cover, and we don't have a parks department per se, it'd be public works, but who wants to talk about, I mean, maybe people want to talk about larger public works, maybe, but but I think you're hearing what we're saying.
Okay, yeah.
And City Hall works great for us to, prototype it and give it a go and see how things work out. I had a conversation with the incoming principal of KMS, and he is, very open to hosting something along these lines at some point with us. Also, he really wants to partner with the city in this. They have a great gym that would work for something like this also. So, but maybe that's when we do a North Kenmore one and then a South Kenmore one at Inglewood or something like that. So,
okay. Are you thinking about sometime in the fall, September, October, something like that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that gives enough time to plan.
One piece of context is in the first half of September, I think the week of September 11th, we're going to have a community engagement event around the climate action plan. We're going to get, we have the menu of things in the climate action plan, and we want to hear from the public on what they want to be in the, the next phase of the plan that we're going to present to you in late October. So we're going to have a community engagement meeting around that in the first half of September. So maybe we could do this second half of September, first half of October.
I mean, yeah, it'd be nice if it coincided, a few weeks after one of our quarterly newsletters or something like that also. But again, I'll defer. I think we would defer it all to you on how to best get the word out.
Yeah. So our next quarterly newsletter is going to go out right before our 25th anniversary celebration in August, but we could probably nail down the date and get it in that newsletter.
Yeah, if we can nail it down quickly, we can definitely get it in the August newsletter. And I do think as far as the location, the experts would say it's best to go off-site and kind of create a different atmosphere. But I think the Kenmore Love Notes event that was here is also a good example that if you get creative with your activities and your outreach, that you can kind of change the dynamic in this room if this is the best place to have it.
Yeah, maybe provide a place for something for kids to do, and maybe get out our dream play build model that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think with the Love Where You Live project, where we've been out at farmers markets, I think there is a desire for this, and you'll find that like that more casual conversation and bringing the human side to government, people just talk to you in a totally different way when you're at that booth. And when we have managers out there, people really want to engage and ask specific questions. So I think there's a desire for it, and we're engaging with a lot of new people this summer and getting their information where hopefully we can get new people at this town hall as well to kind of connect with new residents.
Yeah, that all sounds great to me. Any other comments?
The first city I worked for, the city manager was such a fan of the roundtable format, and that's how all the council meetings were. And whenever they held a public hearing, he had all the participants sit at round tables, and you didn't necessarily sit with like-minded people at the table, but you kind of were forced to interact with people at the table, and it worked. And he had that for all the city council meetings, and everything was the round table format. So yeah, let's try it out.
Interesting. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other staff?
Yeah, just
reports?
one more thing. So July is a really important month for bus rapid transit stride project. And I'm looking over at Councilmember Baker, who is on the Sound Transit Board. So last Thursday, there was a system expansion committee where they looked at the proposal for stride. It's called baselining. It's where they come up with the final cost estimate, final design, and give direction to do final design and go out to bid. It's kind of the last decision the board makes before it goes out to bid. Now we're still a couple of years away from going out to bid, but there's been other milestones such as SEPA and what they call project to be built and right-of-way acquisition. So other milestones have come and gone. This, I don't want to say last milestone, but it is kind of a last milestone, is happening this month. So the System Expansion Committee, that they're a committee of the Sound Transit Board, they talked about it on Thursday and gave our BRT project the green light to go forward as currently designed, including bus access lanes through Lake Forest Park. Why do I bring them up? Because that's been controversial lately. So the next, so now it goes to the Sound Transit Board on Thursday, July 27th at 1:30 at the Sound Transit Boardroom in downtown Seattle. And there's going to be a showing of opponents there, and we need to have a showing of support there for this project. We have a lot of folks here and in Bothell, they're going to be using that line, and it's important for them to have as quick access as possible to the light rail station at 145th. So we're hoping that representatives of this council and Bothell Council can come and actually come forward and testify and show our unified support for this project. So I can follow up with you individually. It'd be amazing if the mayors of Bothell and Kenmore were up there shoulder to shoulder
saying the same thing. But if not the mayors, council members too, deputy mayors. So 1:30, July 27th, that's a Thursday. And in person is preferable. They do accept online testimony, but in person makes a big difference. And I can, if you don't have one, I got a yellow t-shirt for you. So, I can follow up with you individually on that instead of trying to figure it out now. So that's all I have.
All right. Councilmember reports and comments. Councilmember Baker.
Yes, National League of Cities has their summer meeting starting Thursday in Tacoma. And I plan on attending as a past board member. There's a number of programs, and I believe, Karina, you'll be there. Your committee's meeting, right? Good. And I had forgot to mention in last week about AWC's annual meeting. And I was there, carried the flag, represented the city. That's it. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
Great article out of Wedgwood recently about a neighborhood that rallied around a very old cedar tree and amidst a proposal to develop a bit of the property for, I can't remember how many units, but the wonderful thing that came out of that, or at least is still transpiring now, is that the Snoqualmie tribe became involved as a expression of their historic interest in their route from closer to the mountains down to the sound for ancient trading routes and the rest of it. And it really just underscores I think the indigenous importance to paying attention to tree preservation. So very cool. And then also my wife and I went for a walk today, and I tried to talk her out of it, but she brought along a grabber tool and a garbage bag. And we went from 198th, 61st, up around 202nd, back down around 198th and back around, and managed to fill the entire garbage bag of stuff. So it's just it doesn't look terrible actually when you drive on. It's not like the sides of the freeways, for instance, but there's a lot of stuff out there to be collected. So anyway.
Councilor Kuklar.
Just one update for, I guess, other council members, but they touched on this a little bit in our presentation with King County Metro, but at the Eastside Transportation Partnership, they did share more details about 4% reduction of services on top of an already 4% reduction of services to start in September. So that totals about 500,000 service hours. They're going to, they are already communicating this to riders, but just in case you hear anything, they'll ramp up communications leading into September.
Councilor Shribnick.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. Just as Baker had said, we have the National League of Cities leadership meeting this week, the conference, and I appreciate his past work with the board. We have the beauty of it, it's in Tacoma, so we don't have to fly anywhere. We can be close to home, and that's all because Mayor Woodward's of Tacoma is our president of National League of Cities, and there's some amazing tours that are going to be happening. I'm looking forward to that. The Hazardous Waste Board would really like us to be sharing the hazardous waste recycling events with our communities. So hopefully we can start doing that. And other than that, it's just been so hot. So I hope that we have a few more cool days coming back to us. And I'm happy that we're having successful markets. Our community loves the market and the events connected to the market. Like Juneteenth, it's a beautiful thing. And I look forward to our next meeting. We're almost to August.
Deputy Mayor.
Nothing to add this evening. Thank you.
All right, I also. Sorry, yes, Deputy Mayor.
Just to remind, that's okay. Thank you.
I think what we're gonna do is remind people to turn in their ballots, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Which I did on my walk here today, which is, it's always nice having the Dropbox there. I have nothing to add. Councilmember Kugler already covered the highlights from the ETP meeting. And with that, we're adjourned.
I just think that at the time. Hey, how you doing?
Say hi to you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Nice to